Thanks for joining us for this podcast from Atlee Church. Atlee is a safe place for those who've given up on church or never went. Our mission is to reach seekers and equip believers to love God, love themselves, love others, and serve the world. We'd love to have you connect with us at one of our physical campuses or online for a weekend service. You can find out more about our locations and service times on our website. We hope that you will be encouraged and challenged to take the next step in your personal faith journey through the message you're about to hear.
In that. So first of all, guys, you're welcome. That was a subtle reminder that in just a couple of days, the big day's coming up, all right? So now you can thank me for, reminding you that, and so you got no excuse. Second of all, I'm just curious, how many ladies have a Pinterest account or page or whatever it is? All right, great, wow. All right, men, how many of you knew your wife had a Pinterest page or account? How many? A couple of you? Wow. How many of you men have actually been on Pinterest? All 4 of you, 5 of you. All right, very good. So if you're like me, I just recently actually went on, and there's some cool stuff on there. I'm just saying that's man stuff, by the way. Just be clear about that. Well, let me welcome everybody to the services this weekend. Let me welcome those at our other campuses, and especially those watching online. Glad that you're part of today. And as we continue with week 2 of this series that we've titled, How's Your Love Life? Last week, we kind of set this up this way. We're talking about how couples can go the distance. A couple weeks ago, we celebrated another huge milestone marker for our marriage. We made it 35 years and celebrated that just a couple weeks ago. Especially give it up to her because she had to put up with me. But one of the things we did, we always go to Outer Banks to celebrate our anniversary. While we were down there, we got to talking about what we thought had helped us make it to this point. Because to be honest with you, there was a point in our relationship that we didn't think about 10 years into it, we had had a tough conversation and had to ask the question, are we going to work through this or are we done? And so we decided to work through it, and so I think we're both excited that we did. I hope we are. I know I am. But as we sat there, we made a list of the things that we thought that helped us get to this point. And honestly, as we looked at the list after we made it, we really said, we really believe we keep doing these things that will not just make it another 35 years, but hopefully, another 65, 75 years, however many
really
years
old.
we'd really be old by then, wouldn't we? So we won't tell them how old that would be. But anyway, but then we also thought as we were preparing for this series, wouldn't these be good things to share with other couples, because we think these same things will be what will help other couples make it for the long haul as well. And so what we're doing, we kind of took our list and put everything down into 4 categories under 4 topics, and each week we're sharing one of those with you. So if you happen to miss a week, you can go back to our website or go to our app and watch one of the services and messages if you missed that. Now, before we get into today's, though, I want to finish something that was started last week. If you remember, if you were here last week, Lynette talked about how we had met in 5th grade. And I don't remember that, but she remembered that. And then we came back together. We just happened to connect again after high school. But during 5th grade, she talked about how when we were going to church together, that all the 5th grade girls, that's how we were in 5th grade at that point, had this crush on me. And so I want to show you a picture of what they had a crush on. And you tell me if this makes sense. Take a look. Don't laugh. That ain't funny. So
he's cute.
Now, I'm serious. Nobody would have a crush on that. I'm just saying, all right? And especially when you put this picture beside this one. So this is Lynette. Now, my point is made, okay? Why would she have a crush on that, right? So I'm just saying, kind of crazy.
Yeah, but the next one shows what I really remember. A little bit better.
Go ahead and bring up the next one, guys. Oh, there you go. Look at that hairdo, man. It's going from bad to worse.
Right? He's cute.
Wow. All right. I'm glad you think I'm cute, baby.
You're still cute.
I'm still cute. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. So I'll get you a chocolate-covered heart this week.
No.
So. All right, so let's dive in. Here's the way I want to set up today. Of all the relationships that exist, marriage, I'm convinced, is the one that is the most neglected. It really is the most neglected relationship of all. And here's why I say that. Just look at the statistics. Look at the divorce statistic. How many marriages end in divorce? It's scary. And if you look at them, and I've had the privilege of meeting with a lot of couples, and even when we've, surveyed our own marriage, what we've found and what I've found is this, that usually at the heart of it, the reason that marriage relationships end is because of some sort of neglect in the relationship, or there was just some taking for granted that things were okay and going to be okay. Now, which leads to the second thing that we believe has helped us get to this 35-year mark. We have learned that it takes careful and intentional investment. So last week we talked about how following after God first, and we talked about how making sure that God was the love of our life. This week we want to talk to you, number 2, on the back of the program, if you want to take some notes and fill in the blanks. The first one, and what we're going to look at today, is this: invest in it. Invest in it. Now let me say this. I'm not talking about investing in your wedding. I'm talking about investing in your marriage. I know that there's this assumption that goes around that seems that if you have the fairy tale wedding, you'll have a fairy tale marriage. But if you've been married for any amount of time, you know that a fairy tale wedding does not lead to a fairy tale marriage. Am I right about that? It just doesn't happen. I'll find my place here. I'm always amazed at this when it comes to weddings, especially. How couples are willing to invest so much in a single day of their relationship. One of the things that I require of any couple that I'm going to marry is for them to go to pre-marriage counseling. It's one day, 6 to 8 hours, and an investment of about $300. And I'm always amazed at how they kind of cringe at that. The thought of a whole day, I'm going to invest a whole day in pre-marriage counseling and then $300, but yet they don't think twice about spending thousands of dollars on something that's only going to last for about 20 minutes. Where the other thing, man, it could set them up for the long haul. I want to put a couple numbers up here and walk you through an exercise. First one, $26,000. Next one, $19,000. $1,800, and the last one, $60. Talk about investment, all right? So keeping that in mind. These numbers represent dollars, all right? So the first one, $26,000. That is the average amount of money that a couple spends on their wedding day alone. $26,000. Now you say, well, we didn't spend nowhere near that. Well, the average, I won't say the average, but a lot of people fall in that somewhere around $10,000. But the national average is $26,000 that a couple will spend on their wedding. Now, the next number, $19,000, is what you can expect to pay. This is the average cost of what it costs for a couple to get a divorce. All right, now this is just the court costs and the lawyer costs, not all the other costs that goes into it and those payments that you make for months and years after that. So $19,000, $1,800. So I did some research to find what counseling costs for couples who, whether you're going through a hard time or you just want to work at your marriage and make it better. Counselors on average recommend about a 12-month marriage therapy deal. Not 12 months, but 12 weeks. And the average cost for that is anywhere from $75 to $150 per session. So I went with the long side of that, and it comes out to about $1,800 for 1 hour, 12 weeks. All right, does that make sense? All right, this last one, $60. $60. That's what it would cost you as a couple to go to a 2-day marriage conference this coming weekend at PCC. Now let me ask you, which do you think is going to give you your biggest bang for your buck? $60, sure, no doubt. That's a great place to start. And even that one. And again, whether you're having a hard time or not in your relationship and you just want to make it better, that is worth the investment when you think about the alternatives, isn't it? So it just kind of brings into perspective what we're talking about. Here's another thing that kind of always gets me when I'm meeting with couples. I always want to know and hope that they've dated for at least a year, so they've experienced, at least 4 seasons together. And but I'll start talking to them and ask them, about their relationship with each other, and they're very quick to let me know, hey, we've got this thing figured out. We're in love with each other. Okay, we know each other, and I'll start talking about expectations. Oh, we know that, and then I'll ask certain questions. Oh, I didn't know that was your expectation. So all of a sudden or I'll ask them this: have you had your first fight yet? Oh yeah, we've got it. We know how to solve those and everything. And I just want to say this. If that's you, maybe you're a couple and you're thinking about getting married, and maybe you think you got it all figured out. Let me just tell you right up front, you have no stinking idea what you're about to get into. You have no idea what you're about to do.
Yeah, that's right. The person you've been dating is not going to be the same person the next morning after your wedding.
Somebody said this week. The person you marry is not the person that you will bury. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and it gets worse. Just when you think you've had it all figured out, you go to bed one night, and the next morning is a different person.
That changes about...
Yeah, about every 5 to 7 years you'll see changes
we've talked about this. I shared this a couple years ago as we were doing this, and again, it's something that people don't think about, but when we first fell in love, I had to learn to love a single person, all right? Well, then we got married, and like she said, man, the person you wake up to the next morning is now your spouse, and it's not the same person that you were dating. So now, then I had to learn how to love a married person. And then we have kids, and now I got to learn how to not love just a wife, but a mother. And so you see all throughout your life, your relationship is just constantly changing, and it really is, and it's amazing how that works. And then there's these things that they just don't tell you about, okay? I'll give you 3 letters. Guys, you will appreciate this one. P. M. Anybody know what the third one is? Yeah, so all the guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
See, they don't tell you about this stuff, do they?
All right, well, let's be fair.
Okay.
Right? 3 words. Mid-life crisis. And for men, that's about 3 to 10 year deal, potentially.
Potentially, but
to
guys,
rediscover themselves.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
But let's be fair there too. So guys aren't the only ones who go through midlife crisis. Women also experience that. The good news is for them, it's only 2 to 5 years for them, where for us it's much longer. Now, I want to give you one more word, and this is a big one. Again, and I share this with you out of love, because guys, they just don't tell you about these things, especially when you're just starting out. Here's a big word: menopause.
You really going to go there?
Yes, I'm really going to go there because we've been there. And so I'm just telling you, if you don't know what that is, you better look it up now, okay? Educate yourself now, because you need to be warned about what's going to take place. For women, they could be as short as 10 months and at least maybe 4 years or even a little longer on average. It's a crazy time, I'm just telling you.
Yeah. But after menopause, according to you and your guy friends, things get really better.
Oh, yes, they do. So we'll just leave that right there. Can we just leave that right there? I can't believe you went there, but appreciate that. So, all right, back on topic, all right? So again, we just want to be real with you guys. We really do, and hopefully encourage you. And some of the things that we're going to share with you today, hopefully, are just reminders and hopefully, regardless of where you're at, we hope that this is for couples who are married, for people who couples who are thinking about getting married, or even people who just want to be a couple someday. We really do think that some of this stuff will help. I love what the wisest man in the world had to say about a relationship between a husband and a wife. Here's what he says in Proverbs chapter 30. He said, "There are 3 things that amaze me. No, 4 things that I don't understand. Number 1, how an eagle glides through the sky. Number 2, how a snake slithers on a rock. Number 3, how a ship navigates the ocean. And number 4, how a man loves a woman. Now, let's be honest, we get the first 3, all right? As amazing as those things are to watch, but number 3 is just one that is hard to figure out. And it's not just a man loving a woman, but a woman loving a man. That relationship, especially in marriage, is hard to understand. In fact, Paul in the New Testament refers to it as a mystery as he relates it to the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is a mystery. And so my point is that we spend our whole life as a couple learning that relationship, how to love each other. And to do this and to make it for the long haul, it's going to take that kind of investment to learn how to love each other that way.
So while we were talking about how we do that, how we invest in our relationship, we came up with 4 categories that we want to share with you today and to group together the many ways that it can be done. But there's really 5, and one of them we talked about last week, following after God, making Him first in our first love is the greatest investment that sets the foundation for your entire marriage.
Yeah, speaking of foundation and last week's conversation, anybody watch the Super Bowl last week? Yep. Any Eagles fans in here? I saw a couple over here. Yes, got the shirts and all on. I think I'm going to now be an Eagles fan, just saying. I think I'm about done with the Redskins, but we'll see. Jury's still out on that one. But here's what happened. It was really cool. So last week, Mark, our executive pastor, got somebody text message him and sent him a link to a video and said, hey, I know that you and Pastor Jeff aren't Eagles fans, but this video really ties into the message that was shared last week. And it's an interview that was done with Zach Ertz. Any Zach Ertz fans in? Again, I saw somebody over here who's got his jersey on. It's a really cool interview, and I want you to listen to what he says about the foundation of his marriage. Let's take a listen. So I hope you caught that. He said that the foundation of their marriage was the Word of God. Exactly what we talked about last week, that the foundation for any marriage has to be the Word of God. And so all of these things that we're talking about as far as investments go today, that's where it has to start. And that's the most important thing that you can invest in, especially if you're going to make the rest of this work. So here's what we want to do. We want to give you 4 things to think about, 4 categories, again, that we've kind of come up with of ways to invest in your marriage. The first one on the back of your program, it was a bug. See, this is what wives do. You see how that worked? What kind of bug was it? Anyway, so here's number 1. On the back of your program is this, side by side, side by side.
So what we mean by side is all the fun stuff that you do together. The dates, doing hobbies, recreational stuff, the things you both enjoy that you can do together. This creates places of breaking away from the day-to-day ruts of work and family, as well as opportunities for romance. And it's continuing what we do when we first started dating. We met in Hampton, and when we first started dating, we loved to go for walks at our favorite place at Fort Monroe. We would go fishing at one of their piers, catching spot and flounder. That was kind of my first experience with fishing, so it was fun. And sometimes we would go to movies from time to time. But let me tell you about the first movie we went to on our first date.
Do we have to go there?
We went to a movie called Chariots of Fire about an Olympian racer. And although the story was interesting, Jeff fell asleep. Yes, on our first official date, he fell asleep.
Yes, it's true. I fell asleep on our first date. It was horrible. I couldn't believe I've never fallen asleep in a movie before. And I don't know, whatever. It was a good movie, but I did fall asleep on our first date. But in all fairness, let's also remember what happened on our first date. Just outside that movie theater, it was where we had our first kiss. So see, I remember that. So just so I did redeem that night anyway.
Yeah. So over the years, we haven't always done it well because life gets in the way of having fun. But when that happens, it tends to create an environment of separate living. even though we're in the same household. So the key is to recognize that and be intentional about doing things again and having fun together again. We discovered that we enjoy the outdoors, so we'll plan walks and hikes and bike riding. Sometimes we'll drive up to the Blue Ridge, but often it's just a nearby park or whatever. We enjoy camping and sitting by the fire. We have a fire pit in our backyard as well. And it doesn't have to be costly. It can be simple things. We love drive time because we love the conversations that we have when we take drives. We love enjoying breakfast on our deck when the weather's nice and just having that time together. And we still go to the occasional movie, but sometimes that takes compromise, and so we have to be a little bit more picky about what we see.
The kind of movies she wants to see versus the kind of movies that I want to see. Guys, can you relate? Chick flicks are okay, but every guy likes a good man movie once in a while. So.
But the key is making time and finding out what you do like to do together and you both enjoy. I don't really fish with Jeff much anymore. He kind of went from saltwater to freshwater, and that got a little boring for me.
Hey, but at least he knows the difference, right? I mean, that's huge. So.
If I do go, I'll take a book usually. But we did get a couple of kayaks, which I enjoy, so then he still gets to go fishing. But living intentionally side by side gives us the enjoyment of life together, and it creates a sense of adventure. Joy on the journey when you make sure that you do those things.
I think the key word that she said there is living intentionally, doing these things with intentionality. These are the things that we did when we first started dating and getting to know each other. They were fun things, and sometimes I think we just forget to do those as we get married and life gets busy and kids come along, and it's one of those things that we just stop investing in, and yet it can have the greatest dividend. I like what Solomon says to remind us about this. Here's what he writes. He says, enjoy life with your wife. Everybody say enjoy.
Enjoy.
Isn't it amazing that we have to be reminded to do this? Now, this was written from a man's point of view to a man, but it can go the other way. Enjoy life with your husband. All right, so both ways. But isn't it sad that we have to be reminded to do that? Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun. Now, Solomon's at an interesting place in his life, no doubt. He's tried everything. God has given him incredible wisdom, and to this day, he's still considered the wisest man to have ever lived outside of Jesus himself. And so he had acquired all of this stuff and had more things than anybody could ever imagine, and yet for him it was all meaningless. And when he boiled it back down to what was most important, it was about relationships, and particularly this relationship in marriage. And so he writes and he says that. And then he ends this by saying, the wife that God gives you is your reward for all your earthly toil. Your wife, your husband, is a reward that God has given you while you work through this life, while you walk through it and all that comes through it. So think of this this way. You choose whether or not you're going to enjoy this reward. The choice is up to you to either invest in it or not. If you don't invest in it, then you can't complain about where you're at in that relationship.
So as we've said, you know that marriage does take work. So the next category is face-to-face. This is where it can get down to a little bit more nitty-gritty. Working on our marriages means that we choose to follow wise counsel that teaches godly principles for relationships, and we need to be ready to have the hard and honest conversations, to be ready to follow God's truth in his principles. And if we're not willing to live obedient to Christ in this area, the hard just becomes harder. We've never been to marriage counseling, but early on, Jeff and I had the incredible opportunity to be mentored by an older couple who became good friends. We met with them on a regular basis for a few weeks, and while we asked the tough questions, they challenged us with basic truths as we navigated being newlyweds. We had a desire to grow and to strengthen our marriage and our relationship and to do that well. We've taken the time to go on marriage retreats and attend several conferences. We've participated in marriage small groups. But not only does investing in these types of activities review the principles learned early on, but reminds us of truths that work. And it helps us to become aware of the things that we have either forgotten or still need to work on.
Yeah, so think when we say face-to-face, a couple weeks ago we talked about the discipline of being in a small group. It's one thing to do life, in rows together, but it's another thing to do life in circles where we can sit face-to-face and have honest and real conversations with each other. And at the heart of it, that's really what this principle is about. Here's one of the things that I have benefited the most from participating in these kind of activities. To find out that I'm not and we're not unique in our struggles. To find out that what we think is, well, we're the only ones who are going through that. We're the only ones who are experiencing that. We're the only ones who have those kind of questions and are afraid to ask. But you get in these environments where, whether it's in counseling, whether it's mentoring, whether it's in doing life together in small groups with other couples and doing studies together, and all of a sudden you realize, okay, this isn't unique to us. Everybody is kind of going through those different things at different times. And so it really just creates opportunities for us to learn, to ask those hard, embarrassing questions. Sometimes the cool thing is sometimes usually within a group, somebody else will ask it and you don't have to, but you're thankful that they did. Anybody relate to that? We've been there, right? So here's a great scripture verse that encourages this principle. Proverbs 11:14 says, where there is no guidance, the people fall. Where there's no guidance, the people fall. But in abundance of counselors, there is victory. Now, there's a lot of verses that speak to this idea of the wisdom that we gain from meeting with other people, from being, and seeking counsel from others. Now, why did we call this face-to-face? Again, this is where we learn to talk about the hard stuff, the not so comfortable stuff, the stuff that sometimes we don't know how to put in words, but we're struggling with, and so this allows us to be able to understand even what we're feeling and what we're going through, and be able to begin to talk about this. This allows us, again, to sit face-to-face with each other and sometimes have those difficult conversations, which I promise will set up for the next investment, which number 3 on your list is this: heart to heart. Heart to heart. Now, I got to tell you how we came up with this third one. We didn't agree on the title. I had a different idea in mind for number 3, and so instead of heart to heart, I wanted it to be belly button to belly button. All right? But Lynette was like, no, we can't go there. There's more to this one than just the physical part of this relationship. And she's right. So she won out, and so we went with heart to heart.
Yeah, so I look at this point and the previous point as being just as much about intimacy as it is affection. Intimacy is about being known. All of us have within us a desire to be loved and to be known. So when we need to have the tough and honest conversations in our marriage, for instance, when we need to talk about what has hurt us or what we need or something we're struggling with, or we need to apologize for something that we did, it can be scary and it can be very intimidating. He's quite intimidating sometimes. And yet when we work through difficult circumstances in our relationship, we become closer and grow more intimate. We become better known. When it comes to affection, it can be shown and felt in various ways, physically, emotionally, and even romantically. For instance, I like to hold hands, and we'll do that often while riding in the car or on our walks. We're good about saying, I love you. But sometimes we actually forget to kiss each other, to kiss hello, to kiss goodbye or goodnight, and we could get out of the habit. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but with the busyness and hurriedness of life, we just allow it to get in the way, and we go about our business and run and pass each other. So sometimes we have to be very conscious to make an effort to do those things. And So you see, we're not perfect. We're not the perfect couple by any means, just because we've made it 35 years. But affection has the opportunity to grow out of moments that create fondness and endearment. Like last year, the Valentine's Day gift that Jeff gave me. He's going to have a hard time topping this one. He took me on a drive, which we like to do, to Hampton. This is where we met, dated, and were married. And it took us down a trip down memory lane of firsts, literally. He took me to the place of our first kiss, our first date, where he proposed, where we got married, and then we ended up having a picnic at Fort Monroe, where we like to go walk by the seawall.
And this is where I really took it to the next level. So I'd planned this trip out, all the different places we were going to stop, and then ended at Fort Monroe. And we were going to eat lunch in the car, and we were doing this, and I had arranged for this group of whales to come into the bay while we were sitting there. And they were right on time, too. I mean, it was incredible, wasn't it?
Amazing.
So we grew up down there. It was incredible. Only guy could have planned that part, but I thanked him for it because the timing was perfect. We lived down there, grew up down there, and never had we seen whales down there at the Hampton Roads. They literally came right up to the bridge tunnel, turned around, and went back out, and we watched them come
awesome.
in and go out. So, you know, the only thing that I would say, I'm not so sure that I need to top that date. You know what I'm saying? I think it's her turn. Guys, would you agree with me? Guys? All right, so the ball's in your court, baby.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
and I got nothing.
All right, so there are two things that I want to say here. First is this. If you work at this non-physical part, and guys, let me especially talk to you. If you work at this non-physical part, it really sets up to have much better physical moments, okay? And I think you get that. I hope you get that. I just want to encourage you, don't discredit this, all right? I'll be honest with you. When I planned that trip last year, I really thought she's going to think I'm dumb. You know, I just thought, you know, she's not going to appreciate it, but I'll take a stab at it and try it. And to this date, I think it is the one thing that I have done that really gave me more points than anything else I've ever even attempted to do. So and it was simple. It cost me half a tank of gas and $25 for lunch. And so here we are a year later and still talking about that. So again, don't discredit, don't underestimate the power of working on those moments because they can really lead up to some even better physical moments. Here's the second thing that I want to say. Learn to talk about the physical, okay? Learn to talk about the physical, both before and afterwards. And it doesn't necessarily, I'm not saying right before or right after, but learn to talk about this. Learn to talk about your experiences, okay? To talk about expectations. I get that they're hard conversations. I'll say this, the sex talk, the birds and bees talk, isn't just an awkward conversation for parents to have with their kids. For a lot of couples, this is a very hard conversation to have between themselves, between a husband and wife. And I will say, in our relationship, it was years before I really felt comfortable talking about those times together. And but learning to do that, learning to have those heart-to-heart conversations. When Lynette talks about, we don't just want to be loved, we also want to be known. That's true of both of us. And it's awkward, and probably more awkward for guys than it is for ladies. But I want to just encourage you to have those conversations. Get books, go to counseling, or when you go to a retreat, like if you're going this weekend, take the time to talk about what was talked about in that and how you relate to it and what you got out of it. And ask your spouse, what did they get out of it? And just make room for those kind of conversations. They can be very freeing and rewarding conversations. They really can. That's probably enough about that one. So let me give you, actually going to give you a couple of verses that, from each of our perspectives, that speaks into this idea of heart to heart.
The first one from Proverbs, don't lose your grip on love and loyalty. Tie them around your neck, carve their initials on your heart.
Leave it to the women, to the woman, to go for the intimacy verses in the Bible, and there's a lot of those in there. Solomon has a lot to say about relationships, but I got to bring it home for the guys, okay? The physical part. Here's what Solomon also says. He says, come, let's drink deeply of love till morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. And yes, that's what he's talking about, okay? So I'm just saying. We share those jokingly but seriously. This topic's in the Bible. Solomon, you read some of what Solomon wrote as a couple, and you'll probably blush between each other if you've never had these kind of conversations with each other. But just, God created us to be sexual beings. He really did. And man, when we experience that in a marriage relationship, there's nothing like it. So heart to heart, again, is about both the emotional, the affection, and the physical. One last category. Now, we tried to come up with these to make them memorable, so that maybe you wouldn't remember everything that we've said about them, but at least you kind of remember the categories. This last one we struggled a little bit with, but I think when I explain it to you, it'll make sense. So number 4 on your list is this, time for time. So we got side by side, face to face, heart to heart, and time for time. Here's what I mean by that. One of the best things that you can do to invest in your relationship with your spouse is to give your spouse space and time. Space and time away from you, okay? And if you've got a family, maybe even to give them space and time away from that. Now, maybe that freaks you out or whatever, but I had to learn this the hard way. I'll admit, I was horrible at this, especially during a very key time in our relationship. When our boys were middle school or elementary school and middle school especially, I worked long hours. I oversaw a production plant, 4 different plants. I would come home after a 12-hour day and 7-day weeks, and I mean, I didn't think about nothing. I didn't want to be around her. I didn't want to be around the kid. It wasn't so much that I didn't want to. I just needed some downtime, and I'd go out in the garage, and I would just sit out there for hours and work on whatever it was I was working on. When it came to the weekend, if I had a day off, I didn't think twice about going fishing. And at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with those things, but here's what happened. I wasn't giving her equal time to do the same thing. I didn't realize that she needed that space as much as I did. And so I just want to simply, I think we both want to say to you is this, carve out time for yourself. And guys, let me talk to you guys, because I think guys do this more than the ladies do, but guys, whatever time you take for yourself, make sure you allow that time for your wife. I remember when that got into scrapbooking, and I mean, when I say she got into it, she really got into it. And we would carve out time, and she would either go spend long nights or weekends in somebody's garage, or they would go to out of town to work and have fun for a weekend. And when I started making time and allowing her to do that, man, when she would come back from those trips, she was a different mom. She was a different wife. Me and the boys benefited from her having that time as well. And so, guys, again, I just want to encourage you to do that. Even Jesus understood this and knew that there were times that he needed to separate himself from the crowd, from people, just to be alone, to gather his thoughts, to be himself. There are a lot of verses like this one in Luke 5:16 that says this, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So here's the deal. If Jesus needed that kind of time, you need that kind of time. But if you need that kind of time, your spouse needs that kind of time as well. So make sure that you carve that out. So let me bring it home. Of all the things that we invest time and money in, nothing has the potential of bringing about greater returns than the investment that we make in our relationship with our spouse. Bottom line, relationships require investment. We get that. We understand that. Okay? I think sometimes we forget that, but we know that. And when you think about it, as much as it's true with each other, when it comes to our relationship with each other, it's equally true of our relationship with God. Nobody has spent more time and energy investing in a relationship than God has with us. Now think about that. Nobody has spent time. Guys, we say we're going to do all these things and we break promises, but one of the things that is true about God is he has never broken his relationship with us. And so I just want you to think about that because at the heart of it, it goes back to this foundation. The heart of it, the reason that we invest in this relationship with each other is because of what God and the investment that God has made in each of us. And so in just a moment, we're going to give you the opportunity just to listen to a song that was written from God's point of view that speaks to this very fact. And so I just want you to sit and take that in as we talk about the relationship with each other. But at the heart of it, go back to the triangle we talked about last week. Man, when we work on our relationship with God, it's only going to draw us closer to each other. And we're going to do that as we understand the investment that God has made for us. So let me pray for us, and then we'll listen to this song. Father, this morning I thank you for your incredible love. I thank you for the investment that you've made in our relationship with you. And God, that when we invest in each other, that it's really just a reflection of the investment that you've made in our life and the love that you have for us. And so, God, I pray that for couples and folks who are listening today, that God, maybe today just serves as a reminder of something that they need to do to invest in their relationship, to maybe bring it back or raise the bar a little bit, God, whatever they need to do to, Lord, to make that investment. God, I pray that they would do that. And then, Lord, as we just take this moment just to sit quietly and consider the investment that you've made for each of us. Father, we just say thank you. And we thank you for what you're doing. And we pray this in Christ's name. And we all agree together and said, amen.
We hope this message will help you continue to explore, experience, and express God's grace and truth for your life. If Atlee Church is making a difference in your life, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions from this message, we'd love to talk to you. Email us at stories@atleechurch.org. Check out our website for more about our community, our ministries, and how you can financially support Atlee Church to help us continue to share messages like this one. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. We have links on our website, or you can search for us on iTunes to get this podcast every week. Thanks again, and hope to see you next Sunday.